Right, okay, get rid of the transcript thing. Thank you. Welcome everyone to the Just Transition Network meeting. This is something like the 11th one of these we've done, so it feels quite established, but they all feel quite different, so maybe it doesn't feel that established. But thank you very much for coming. First, apologies for the late cancellation of when we were originally going to do this a couple of weeks ago. I can't actually recall why we had to move that all of a sudden, but it was a sudden cancellation requirement, which was I appreciate is really annoying, and so thank you for bearing with, and thank you for joining this one. We've got a few bits to get through today. Hopefully they'll be quite engaging, but we'll just start with, just so we know who we all are, a round of intros. So if we just let each other know who we are, where we're from, anything you're particularly working on at the moment or particularly interested or concerned about at the moment. I'll go first. So I think I hopefully know everyone here, but I'm Sam Perry. I'm currently Green Bargaining Officer for North East Yorkshire and Humber Trades Union Congress, and I'm hosting this. I've been thinking a lot about government policy recently and the Warm Homes Plan and the wobble over funding with that. The news today, and hopefully thanks to some of the lobbying that we've been doing and other partners have been doing, has secured some of that funding. So maybe that's going to stay there. That 13.2 billion that we'd hoped would remain, but we won't know until the spending review next week, I guess. But it shows the delicate balance some of these things are in, right? You know, we can kind of get good climate action, but it just does require some powerful people to help us along the way. So hopefully they are doing that, but we'll see how that plays out. I'll nominate someone to go next, and if we just kind of keep doing intros like that. So Pat, you go.
Oh, me, yeah. Just to let you know, everybody calls me Martin, just to make it confusing for you. Now, Martin's a middle name. I've always been called Martin. That's all it is. That's why I had to think twice when you said Pat. Oh, does it mean me? But anyway, my name's Martin Hickman. I'm branch chair of PCS Yorkshire in the North East. That's in the Home Office. The part of Home Office I work is Windrush. I'll get compensation for victims of the Windrush scandal. I'm currently, along with the National Union, working towards building for a national campaign, which is going to end up in industrial action at some point. It's over quite a wide range of issues. There's loads of them. I've been active in trade union movement since 1979 when I first left Scoil, and then the area I'm from is like a coal mining steel area. So most of my family worked at Pitto went into steelworks. So I was involved in a lot of big, heavy industrial action in the early 80s. So I've been in and out for quite a long time. I've also organised a lot of counter action against the far right in Rotherham and the rest of South Yorkshire as well, culminating in a couple of death threats and a visit to the Crown Court as a witness for the defence. So that was quite interesting. So I've been in and out of things for quite a long time. Been in civil service maybe about 22 years at that time.
Brilliant, thanks, Martin. Let's go to Pat Heron then now.
Hi, my name's Pat Heron. I am at Unison. I'm the Equalities Officer, and I coordinate from staff side all health, safety and wellbeing audits for staff across the trust that I work for. One of my roles for Unison is I am chair of Unison's Northern Region Women's Network. From on that aspect, I have been at the forefront of ensuring that women, because we're a predominantly female union, I've sat on the NEC in Unison. I'm currently sitting on our health executive at this moment in time, and through that I am co-opted onto the staff council that works with NHS England, and I have meetings under health, safety and wellbeing of the staff and obviously all union members on that remit, and we meet with the employers and NHS England around them topics, health, safety, and that. One of my things and all is the crossover of the fact of climate sustainability, and that the women's area, the women's role in it, through the women's network, because we have energy within our network. We have the energy companies. We've been invited to the climate change for women around energy, so I attend them. Obviously, again, I do most of the issues and that to do with what we all do as activists. I would say, you know, attend campaigns and get more actively involved. One of the big things in Unison that I've been involved in is low paid women's role, and the other thing is getting more women health and safety involved in health and safety and being there. We were predominantly, when I first got involved, we were predominantly, we would say we had at least 10% of our health and safety reps in our region were female. And now, can I say that we are now 51% of the health and safety reps in this region from Unison are female. And we are still working on that. And we are working on, obviously, from all the other characteristics, having more people in them that defining there to come forward and being health and safety reps. We absolutely recognise that they are missing faces from that arena. And as this all links, health and safety links into the climate and sustainability and that, and it's the working together of them two reps, them different reps. I work very closely with the green rep within my branch as well.
Fantastic, busy woman, but well done. That's it's interesting. It's interesting to reflect on, yeah, the relationships between those kind of three different areas: women, health and safety, and environment. Obviously, this is just the arbitrary order you're in my screen. So the next person I've got is Ellen.
Hello, everybody. I am the Environment and Climate Officer for my Unite Community branch, which is Leeds, Wakefield and York. And I'm also Secretary of the Campaign Against Climate Change Trade Union Group. I'm nearly forgetting what I was the Secretary of just then. And just to give, I suppose the main thing that we're working on at the moment in that organisation is building for the Year of Trade Union Climate Action, which was endorsed by last year's TUC. And we've also got several unions now, including Unison, PCS, NEU, UCU, Bakers Union, have all sort of, you know, re-endorsed it with motions this year, which hopefully are going to land on the agenda of this coming TUC in September. But you know, it's all about us as grassroots organisers and activists to actually make something happen. Because you know, it's still not, as Sam's pointed out to me, it's like not an official remit of the TUC officers as such to make this happen. It's down to us at the grassroots of our various unions. Much as we, you know, want the support from those at the top, and the public endorsement is important, of course. So yeah, and it's about thinking about actually making sure that this goes beyond internal workplace action as well. That it's about getting people in workplaces and branches and other union forums actually looking outwards, making alliances with community campaigners, climate justice campaigners on a whole range of policy issues, and obviously the internal stuff about, you know, things like heat resilience of our workplaces and things, you know, or things like transport, because we're all commuters in one form or another, you know, clearly are workplace issues, but we have to have people looking outwards and to the wider campaigns as well. And one of the campaigns that I'm also involved in, it's not a trade union campaign, you won't be surprised to learn, but about the sort of rush for carbon capture as a solution to energy emissions, which, you know, is not a solution, and it is actually set to make things rather worse. But I just wanted to say, just in response to what Pat's been, not in response, but triggered a thought that's triggered by what Pat said, to really emphasise that it's not just about energy, and it's not just about, I mean, it is, we're all energy users, but, it's about every section of the economy. It's about every sector and every workplace, and every community. So, we have to make sure that that's understood as well, I think.
Thanks, Ellen. We will come back to, so I'm glad you mentioned the year of trade union climate action and the bounds of what it is we're talking about when we talk about climate activism or green reps or whatever, because we'll come back to this later in the session, hopefully. We'll just finish introductions, Martin, before we come to questions, if that's right. So we'll go to Andrew Johnson.
Yeah, hello there. You can call me Andy if you like. I'm been newly appointed as the environmental officer for my trade union branch. That's Unison Northern Health and Community. I've been on a few of these calls before, so nice to be able to make another one.
Brilliant, thank you very much. We'll go to Martin Pitt-Morley.
Hi, I'm from PCS. I'm part of the EFRA group, which is sort of the Department for the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs. I sit on the sort of executive group, but I have like responsibilities that sit over some of the environmental action pieces that get passed at conference and a part of the environmental action group. And in my real world job, I kind of look at building climate and environment capability in the civil service.
Thanks, Martin. Dave Douglas.
Sammy, all right? Can you hear me okay? I've just jumped on it very quickly. We've just got a bit of a pay thing going on today, so I'm just trying to bounce between two. We've got Congress starting tomorrow, so yeah, just a bit busy. So I'll just explain who I am. So I'm Dave Douglas. I'm from the GMB. I'm the chair of what we're calling the GMB Workers Transition Panel in the region. I've got a reserved energy seat on the central executive for the GMB. And that's pretty much me in terms of this meeting. I've missed a few, so I've been catching up on the transcripts, but yeah, it seems to be going well. So well done.
Cheers, thanks, Dave. We'll come back to you in a bit to go into that panel in a little bit more detail. Nathan.
Hello all. I am an AO currently working on SFI. I am very much in the trenches, seeing everything from the front lines, as it were. I say sat at his desk, not really knowing what is going to be happening. I've been a lifelong supporter of all environmental actions, and have been trying to get involved with groups like Sea Shepherd, but that's very hard to do when you're partially landlocked. Yeah, I'm just here to sit in and hopefully learn some more bits and pieces about what we do.
Fantastic, great to have you here. And last, right? Yeah, but very much not least, Jenny.
Hello there. Yeah, Jenny Patient. I'm based in Sheffield. I'm the environment officer for my branch, which is a Unite not-for-profit branch. And because our members are spread across lots of quite small employers in the not-for-profit sector, typically charities, NGOs, organisations like Shelter, CAB, things like that. So I'm trying to support people within the particular workplaces to undertake environmental audits, to start to understand more about climate change. And I'm also heavily involved in South Yorkshire Climate Alliance, which is like a local campaigning group, and supporting other small groups. So trying to build stronger links between the climate movement and the Labour movement. I am pleased to say I have been selected as a delegate to the Unite Policy Conference upcoming in July. And we've also put a motion in about energy efficiency. So as like making homes more energy efficient as a contribution to mitigating climate change, which is quite a strong subject for Unite with its workers in construction and manufacturing, and housing, and advice. So we cover a lot of the different sectors that this is really relevant to. So yeah, I'm looking forward to being a delegate to Unite Conference for the first time.
Fantastic. I would love to see that, the text of that, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, sure.
Over. Thanks a lot, Jenny. Okay, we'll get on. Martin Hickman, did you have or are you just on mute?
It was just a comment, really. Just what a few people have mentioned. I'm just going to sell out. I completely agree with what they're saying in terms of climate change and how it affects different groups, but also as a wider class issue, because obviously we know the people who are going to suffer most is going to be our own class, because we're the ones who are going to get the rough end of the stick if the climate goes pear-shaped. So I just wanted to say I agree with what you were saying. That's all it is.
Thanks. Well, it's well said as well. Okay, well let's crack on with the if it's business, the kind of the body of what we're here to chat about today. So Dave's already mentioned that he runs this Just Transition panel with GMB. I was going to say present, but I think it's probably not. That's maybe a bit too formal. Could you fill us in on how that panel's going? Think about its aims, approaches, progress. So if you speak for a little bit, and then we'll open it up for a bit of a chat about that, if that's all right, Dave.
Yeah. So I'll start with the purpose. Thanks, Sam. So it's to ensure the workers, not just the employers or the policymakers, are central to the energy transition. Basically, that's its purpose. So we make sure that we have a voice and we're not just told what's happening, basically. We've engaged with welders for looking at skills, like welders. We've engaged with gas engineers, glass workers, chemical workers, steel workers, basically frontline voices within the Yorkshire and the North East. We've probably not, I mean, the panel's been moving probably 6 months now, but it's probably still in its infancy still. What we're looking at really is trying to make the panel drive the work we're going to do, the activity we're going to do. So rather than dictate to them that we believe this is the right way to do it, we're going to try and make those people that sit on that panel drive the agenda. Whilst we've sort of in its infancy, we've already made some reasonable good strides. I mean, we've been to Desnes already. We've spoke to Ed for an hour. We've managed to commit to him to give us another meeting within the next 6 months. So where we've not really got our strategy together yet about where our campaign is going to lead, we've already sort of got a network set up where we might be able to get a bit of leverage on what we want. Probably what we've found so far from the guys who have attended the panel is we've seen a decline in high skilled jobs, so in casualisation of those jobs and outsourcing. So that's what the welders have been sort of telling us. Wages are stagnant or falling, and there's no serious planning for the workforce transition, especially apprentices, and nothing to deal with an exodus of the workers who are ageing. And what we've also found really public facing sort of pamphlets and the way people are using PR, they're not really using the just transition term in the way we'd use it. So obviously we all know it's like born out of the unions. They're using it as a sort of greenwashing, as we call it, whilst undermining everyone's terms and conditions while they're doing it. I think we've got to focus on probably the Humber cluster more than anything else at the moment, because we see a mass sort of potential of investment there, which will mean, probably 20,000 jobs, I think was a quoted amount created. Don't know how many will be lost, but 20,000 created. And you can just see with the amount of money people are talking about that that's a serious number. So that, you can see jobs coming with that. So we can probably believe that. We've looked at the glass industry, specifically at Nottingley, where they're looking to transition from fossil fuel burning in the glass to melt glass, basically in glass furnaces, to something that uses electricity. There's been some projects in France that have already started doing that. But what we're finding with that is that the new tax around packaging is affecting them, and that potentially puts their plans back 10 years if that remains as it is. And just to give you a little overview, there's a packaging tax. I think it was called ERP, or EPR. I couldn't tell you what the three stand for, but basically it goes on weight. So there's a responsibility to pay for the recycling and collection of the waste that they produce. But compared to sort of plastic in its sort of very basic terms, plastic becomes a cheaper way to transport liquids about rather than glass. But obviously we know the problems with plastics. So, but because it goes on weight, obviously plastic's a lot lighter for the same volume. So we're going to look at maybe starting a campaign with them about the glass. We're calling it the glass tax, to try and get that a bit more of an even playing field, so that it goes on maybe volume rather than weight. So that's something we're looking at with the with Nottingley specifically. Is it's got 3 glass works in there. And then we've been looking at my workplace. My sort of substantive role is British Gas and Centrica. So we're looking at the way they're looking to move from natural gas in the storage facility in the North Sea to something that potentially might store hydrogen in the future, and the way they want to gain investment from the government and tax breaks essentially to try and do some retrofit out there, and some trials with blending. So that's pretty much the focus areas that we've been looking at. What we're sort of aiming for, so what we're like looking at by working with these employers, is to try and get some sort of memorandums of understanding, sort of transition agreements around access to the workers, and essentially being able to speak to them about being in trade unions. Looking at training pathways and making sure they're fully funded, and then looking at basically no forced relocation for work or job losses without negotiation, and basically climate jobs to be good jobs, unionised, skilled, and with decent pay. That's pretty much what we're demanding from the people we're talking to. And then I suppose the political engagement. We're heavily focused on public ownership, especially with the industrial strategies going to present to Congress next week. That's very high up in the report we've done, that we want to try and progress, towards public ownership in whatever shape or form that may be. So we'll see how that goes. And we want investment in skills, committed to by politicians, MPs, and them to lobby on behalf of us. For skills and local infrastructure, especially in the industrial communities we know from Yorkshire and Humber, because they've suffered in the past. And I suppose the core message is not to repeat the mistakes of deindustrialisation, and that's pretty much it. Sort of run out of breath, if that's all right, Sam. But I hope that gives everybody an overview of what we're trying to achieve in the region. But it's, as I say, it's very much in its infancy, so it could swing either way.
I think firstly, that's really helpful. Thank you very much for that summary of what you're up to. It's whenever you start, it's the same conversation you have with the Green Rep. What do we do first? And it's the same conversation we're having with Just Transition Panel. It's so broad, it could go any way, right? And so It's quite nice to delve into individual workplaces and realize they're sort of the specific problem that's preventing them making progress. Things like that packaging requirements in glass, and things like skills and pathways, and if there are good jobs but I have to move, then that's not a good job for me. So it's that job quality. It's really interesting to see how it is progressing. Everything always takes time, so I wouldn't worry too much about it being these things do. But it's really useful to have that oversight. I'm sure people will find that useful.
Just to sort of speak on the infancy, I think the problem is we're struggling to get reps who normally do day-to-day grievances, disciplinary pay negotiations, to see this as a priority. But once they've been on the panel maybe once or twice, they do see the importance of it. But it's just trying to make them. I expect you've had the same exact problem with this panel, is to make sure that people actually prioritise that panel rather than prioritise the other work that they're doing, because obviously they only get so much amount of release time, a lot of the reps. But it's the same with the organisers, to be honest. Trying to get the organisers to break from traditional, trade union work to then prioritise something like this is quite difficult. It's like trying to turn the hat roll around, so yeah, that's
Definitely. I mean, that makes
lines up.
sense. And that's, that kind of firefighting versus future proofing is just, there's a kind of, there's an immediacy to one and not to the other. And so you can be procrastinated about or put off, or, yes, that's very important, but, I don't have time right now. I mean, this comes up and again. We got some questions already. We want to open this up for discussion and feedback and thoughts. I'll go to the first, before the two hands. Ellen popped a comment in the chat. Shall I read it out, or do you
Yeah, I
just
didn't see in the
come in?
chat. Sorry, I'm rattling on.
No, it's fine. So, Ellen, do you want to just come in and say what you put in there, and then we'll come to the hands? Or you're just on mute, Ellen?
Beg your pardon. Yeah, I was just saying it'd be really, really good if you know of any good sources of figures. But I know it's really, really, like you've mentioned that there's huge potential for job losses around the Humber, but also potential for new jobs claimed, although not seeing a lot concrete in practice. But it's really, really hard to find any sort of reliable figures on what sectors are we talking about, what new technologies are we talking about, what transitions are we talking about, like technologically. I know a lot depends on stuff that's still in the pipeline, not like negotiations about what gets subsidised and stuff like that. And I find that when you try to find this sort of information, what you're seeing is reports that have been commissioned by this or that industry. So basically, they're not actually objective reports. They're actually pieces of propaganda that they're putting out to say, we're going to provide loads of brilliant jobs. We're going to be really good for the local economy, and that's why you need to subsidise us or whatever. Rather than actually being objective.
Yeah, these are jobs. Yeah.
Studies.
I mean, we've asked the same questions you've been asking, to be honest, around job numbers, and we met quite a knowledgeable guy from Equinor, who basically preempted the question that you've just asked around the numbers, and he just focused really on the amount of money that was going to be invested into it, and I think he wasn't able really to commit to any numbers with the jobs, but he was just saying the sheer amount of money and the construction work that was required to deliver the projects would mean work. And I think rather than press him for numbers, and looking at the scale of what he was talking about, you could just see that the jobs would come, if you know what I mean. But it was frustrating that you can't get numbers. But yeah, the way he explained it. I've just got a map on one of the other screens that I was looking at earlier, which might be helpful just to show you the scale of the hydrogen, the Humber cluster. I don't know if anybody's seen it. Let me see if I can get it. I just turned it off actually, but if I could share that with you, and it's just I can actually share the leaflet with you because it's a publicly available. Yeah. So this is what he was sort of saying with the workplaces. So basically, he was talking about creating the carbon capture pipeline that they wanted to try and build within the Humber with public subsidy. But all the other little white writing on it are all the potential employers or new employers that may be created with this mass investment. So I think the figures they were talking like 20 billion going into this whole project. So it's quite hard to sort of explain in 10 minutes. But if I send you this document, I think it's 17 pages long. If you haven't seen what's potential in the Humber, and you can probably get a rough idea of where those jobs might come.
Yeah, thanks. I just think on this, a lot of this, I'm not sure if I have seen that or not, but again, a lot of it is in a sense, that leaflet's an advertisement.
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
and it's aimed at all of those those with the little white writing, which I can't see on my screen, but I'll look at it later. Actually, they're the projections, aren't they? And a lot of them may or may not happen. Some companies pull out. This is happening. They pull out if they feel that it's not going to be as profitable for them as they hoped, or it feels to me as though the whole thing is actually becoming more fragile.
It definitely is. I think the way he was saying, it was becoming more and more fragile because there is no commitment yet. So the way he was speaking, and you could sort of understand, was that without the foundation, without the commitment, just for example, Equinor, because that's the guy we're talking to, they were spending 180,000 a month just to keep projects warm without progressing with them. So there was only a certain amount of time they were prepared to pay 180,000 a month out before they leave the UK and they go and do something else, because it's not a UK based company. It's an international company. So their frustration is that they're not getting a commitment on what potentially may happen because they can't afford to keep spending the money to keep the projects warm, which means we'll miss out on the jobs.
We've got some other hands up. That's really useful and insightful.
Yeah.
And it's quite interesting to think about what if the numbers themselves don't actually matter. Maybe if it's a number, a large number, maybe that's, if it's 100 or 200, maybe it doesn't,
Yeah.
We've got other hands, so we'll go to Martin. Martin Pitt Morley was first.
Hi, there's some really interesting stuff in there, actually. I've got a few mates who sort of work in the wind farm industry, and it's a kind of a bit of a boom at the moment with a lot of the contracts being put forward, but it's interesting to see that there's some kind of decline in that. What I want to talk about is just, so I think it's the extended producer responsibility sort of ERP stuff. Now, I was talking with some of the policy leads about a month ago or two, because we're trying to do some sectoral engagement on that, and I've been linking them up with a few people. So if you wanted to pass your contact details over, I could link you in with a team that's looking at that regulation, and you could potentially maybe speak directly to them. I've got concerns around that sort of development. Going on. So just if you wouldn't mind just dropping your details in the chat.
Yeah.
And thank you, so.
Yeah, sound good.
That's great. Thank you. That's a great connection there. We'll go to the other Martin.
Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, yeah, I mean, one of the reasons that drew me to this today is we've currently passed a motion at conference the other week about what we have is something in our branch and across the civil service. It's called hybrid working, where people are working a few days at home and they go into the workplace. Depending on the type of role they've got, about 80% of our staff do hybrid, about 20% are on shifts who don't do the hybrid. And you'll find it's a similar thing, but not so much in environment agency. They're mostly out in sites and doing stuff like that. But we're hurtling towards an industrial action over this as well as pay. And the reason it is because management are trying to force us back into the workplaces full time. So there's things they're not taking into consideration when they're doing that. Things like, for example, we've got people with caring needs. We've got people both looking after the elderly parents or looking after the children. There are people who've got reasonable adjustments who physically can't travel anymore the way they used to do. There's all kinds of issues. And the other issue is because they've shut lots of local workplaces down, people are having to travel further and further into work, therefore putting the carbon impact up, travelling to work, all that. Now, what we found, and management haven't got a single credible excuse to do this, but what we found is sickness absence in the civil service, in particular in the area where I work, has gone down by 20%. And also productivity has gone up by almost the same as well, because if you're working from home, you're not as distracted and that sort of stuff. So there's a business case to keep it as it is or even improve it. So, and that's something that's really winding a lot of our stuff up. Now, a lot of them haven't linked it to climate yet. I have, and a few others, because it does have an impact on climate as well. All these people travelling in morning to work using the cars, all that kind of stuff. So that's, for me, that's a climate issue in itself. You'll probably see when we go out on strike getting condemned by government like we usually do and stuff like that. So that's something I'd like to learn a little bit more of. We've also just elected 2 new Green reps, so I'm going to be encouraging them to come along to this at some point as well, because obviously they can come back and report to us. But I'm just on here today just to find out what it's all about. And I just want to make, that's why I'm linking the industrial action into green issues, because like I've already said, it does impact on all of us on various different areas, and that's one of the areas it impacts in our particular branch.
Thanks. It's, yeah, I mean, that's a live dispute that's happening at the moment, obviously, and we all, I'm sure, wish you all the best of luck with it. It is the kind of thing that is happening in lots of workplaces, those kind of discussions. So it's interesting to see how that will progress and how the government is, as an employer, is thinking about the changes to working from home. Just immediately off the thing, we published a greener workplaces toolkit recently. I'm trying to remember what it's called, which is a new kind of guide for green reps, and it's got a section on working from home and that kind of flexible working piece. So some of the resources in there may be helpful to you. I can drop the link to that towards the end of this. But I think, yeah, it's and I think the idea of finding a kind of climate angle to existing disputes, which, you know, is the case for every dispute nowadays, you know, with net zero being such a prominent part of our economy, I think it's really interesting and can bring more people in and make our arguments more compelling. Should we go to Jenny?
Yeah, hi, thanks. Yeah, just to come back to Dave, to your map, and just linking that to some of the things you were saying, really, and also to some previous conversations we'd had. One of the companies on that map is VPI Immingham, which is a gas power station and has carbon capture plans proposals. When we visited that with the what do we call it, Just Transition Committee of the TUC in the region when I was working there, and lots of us got the chance to look around and hear about their proposals. It left us with loads and loads of questions about sort of energy pricing and sort of where the money was coming from for various things and how that was going to impact on consumers, and, you know, sort of the, I suppose, the social equity around how these massive projects are funded and the impact, I suppose, on our members at the other end, you know, at home when their energy bills change, you know. But the thing that really struck me that day was we walked round, was I didn't see any, they all had, we saw all the workers we saw, we didn't see many workers, but they all had kind of high vis with different logos on, and they weren't really saying VPI Immingham. They were all different companies that are working there. And I'm sure you absolutely know that's how a power station runs these days. It's like there's loads of different companies involved, loads of outsourcing of different roles and different contracts. And so it's that kind of structure. When we're talking about those workers, it's like they're all working for different companies and those really complex financial arrangements between them. So what are these jobs that are going to be created, and how do we ensure that, as you said, they are actually decent jobs, they are actually good jobs? And so it makes it, to me, really important. And I know there was an example we were talking about with people fitting gas boilers in housing associations some time ago when I met you before.
Yeah.
Again, with the outsourced, you know, different conditions, really difficult for the union to actually find a pathway through it, because we're dealing with all these different companies and their different priorities, you know, and their different attitudes. So, I mean, the thing about bringing it under public control or doing more of the work under public control is really absolutely important. And that's certainly what we've been saying in the retrofit scene, you know, the insulating homes, is let the local authorities have their head on this, give them the money, get them to train people, get them to, you know, sort of take a lead on it, because that's the only way that you will actually get people trained up, that you will get decent jobs, that you will actually get the job done to high quality first time. Now, you know, it's a completely different world in the world of like offshore gas and stuff, I know, but even so, it's like when we look at the reality of what that map shows and the companies that are on there, there's loads of companies on there, and beneath every single line saying VPI Immingham, there's another load of companies that are doing those outsourced contracts. That's the environment that unions are working in with this. So they can sell, they can sort of sell us what they like, but we have to be very careful about, well, what's the reality on the ground going to be? Are those actually going to be real jobs, decent jobs, long-term jobs, well-trained jobs, well-skilled jobs? And that is absolutely the question, not just how many jobs.
No, and what we're finding as well, you're right to point out, is that standards slip when it's those private companies, because it goes through so many chains. The retrofit example, from a few years ago when they're doing the installation of houses, you can see now, I work in houses, you can see the quality of the work that's being done because it's not checked. There's no checks and balances, and the money is sort of abused, isn't it? The funding's abused in a way that, because it's casualised out there. What we going away from the region, I think the biggest indicator for that to us is our members at Hinkley Point, where you can imagine the amount of companies on Hinkley Point. But it's a really, really complex issue. I think we created so just to go on to Congress that's coming up this week. There was around, I think there's 40 motions were in around construction, energy, and manufacturing, all related to climate. And we've worked on a sort of report and a sort of backbone to a campaign across the country. And we've pushed, when the first draft sort of came out, public sort of ownership was just in there. But it's quite welcome that we've absolutely pushed that to the second paragraph and talked about public ownership for the first sort of page, and then progressed on to everything else, because that is the ultimate goal. And obviously to try and infiltrate this BG Energy, whatever it's going to be, GB Energy, and try and get within that. So we've got the unions already in that. So we can try and promote public ownership. What I would say, I was out on the Rough storage facility about 3 weeks ago now. They flew me out there just to see what was going on out there, which was quite amazing, really. And then I flew over to Morecambe to see the gas rig, and then out over to where it comes on shore in Barrow. And they were all direct labour. Employees was direct labour for either Centrica or Spirit Energy. So their standards were pretty good. But what we found with those is those facilities have basically fallen apart. So they need a bit of investment to try and get them back up to a standard where they can run on a decent capacity. If they're going to try and progress into something like hydrogen, then they need some real sort of public backing. Unfortunately, that means that the capitalist shareholders do well out of it, but the guys working there weren't on poor terms and conditions. They had good terms and conditions, and they were very lifelong engineers there. I think one thing that struck me is that everybody's aging, and the majority of that workforce is pushing 50 plus, and the skills and the knowledge and that, they're all, late 40s, early 50s, and you're not seeing the apprentices, you're not seeing the other people coming through to take the roles, which is a concern. And that's what the welder, the guy, I'm not exactly sure what company he works for in Teesside, but that's his take on it, is that the skills and the certifications and things now aren't anywhere near as hard to get as what they used to be. And you can almost pay for certification these days because the colleges seem to want to satisfy another market where they make money out of providing certification. I think that's the same in the sort of domestic area of the gas safe, where if you're not within sort of British Gas and doing within their assessment centres, and you're out there in a college somewhere, you can basically pay for that qualification rather than achieve it, which is a concern. But I mean, you can imagine what this panel's been like so far. I think we've got 50 people on it, and every time we open up a meeting, we end up with another 10 different agenda items to try and tackle. So we're just in a position really where we need to map the region and prioritise what the big hitters are, and then try and move into something else. But yeah, we're totally committed to public ownership. You're absolutely right with that.
Thanks a lot, Dave.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks. it's complicated stuff, isn't it? And it is about backing the right horse, you know, on those. I mean, that map, just to go back to it, not all of those are equal. Some of them are a lot worse companies than others.
Yeah, yeah.
So, you know, it's about making sure that we, you know, I don't the kind of rising tide, you know, catching all boats kind of thing, rather than just putting the money wherever it can go, to kind of hope that jobs come out of that, and that those jobs are good jobs. It's a huge topic, and so thank you very much for being here, firstly, and for us to kind of shallow diving into that. It's really helpful, I think, for
Yeah, I think if you want my personal sort of opinion on it, on the way we've set off with it, is I think the biggest thing I believe, and this is not like a collective sort of opinion, but I believe that if you're going to receive public money in any way, shape, or form, part of that checklist when you try to lobby for that money or receive that money, and they'll go through certain aspects of what you need to have. I think within that, you need to. It almost needs to be a guarantee of union recognition. It needs to be one of the checks, like number 14 on the checklist needs to be, we have to allow a trade union into this, workplace, access to the people working to let them make an informed choice about whether they want to be in a union or not. And that's not currently in there. You've seen a lot of companies receive vast amounts of public money without anything tied to workers and workers' rights and having anybody on any board or anything like that. A good example is, again, Century, because I'm quite close to them, is that they've received quite a lot of money to trial blending in a power station in Lincolnshire. I believe Jenny might know about it. But there's nothing tied to workers' rights, nothing tied to union recognition within that. And when you've got, I don't think it was done by the Labour government, because I think it's been there in the pipeline for a while. But if they're going to receive public money and it's a Labour government, they have to allow us access to their workers. And I think if they're receiving public money, we expect them to pick up the phone and allow us access to their workers as well, because they're receiving public money, and it's a Labour government. So that's one thing I'm going to be really concentrating on, and maybe build a campaign around that.
Yeah, well, that definitely, I think that conditionality is just really important. And actually, I think when we spoke, you said that Ed Miliband kind of agrees with that.
Yeah.
When I spoke to him, he nods along. That's fine. The other ministers do the same. That is the assumption. But then somehow in the translation of when it becomes a scheme, it drops off.
Yeah.
And yeah, so holding their feet to the fire on that is, I think, just really, really, really important. But we do need to move on. So I'm going to thank you very much for your contribution there. That's really useful, and I think other people would have found that useful as well. So thank you, firstly.
No problem.
Thanks. The next bit, the kind of next substantive bit of that we thought we'd go through today, is thinking about. I think I called it "Where Next" for green organising or something in the advert and the meeting item. So it's just space for us to think about and reflect a little bit on what we've been doing so far. I think especially in awareness that this Trade Union Year of Climate Action is upcoming. It's either, depending on which union you're in, it's either from COP in October, November, through to the COP the following year, or it starts in 2026 on January 1st, earnest. But that Trade Union Year of Climate Action is coming up, and I think that's an opportunity for us to, yes, do more and to be more visible, but also to think about, okay, well, actually, what is green action within the trade union? I guess personally, and from the TC's perspective, I'm also coming at this from that we've just finished our Leveraging Green program of green organizing workshops, where we kind of tackled some of these points and learned a lot, I think, or hopefully people learned a lot and were able to kind of connect and things during that program. And so with that having just concluded, I think it falls on us as TUC, but also with that Year of Climate Action coming up, the wider movement to think about, okay, what next? So during that Leveraging Green, just as a reminder, or for those who weren't part of that, we did a series of workshops. First one, we looked at current high-profile struggles in steel and automotives and the complexity of organising there for a just transition, and where downsizing or closure isn't non-carbon, it means offshoring and kind of dirty carbon, all this kind of stuff, and community pressures. The second one, we looked at how European governments are pursuing just transition in a more positive way in some settings, and what lessons we can learn from those, about community involvement, about government conditionality on money and on being part of the negotiation process. And we also looked at the international labour movement, how that's pursuing just transition as a kind of theme within like the ILO and within the COP process and others. Then we kind of did a session with Dave White on which was really useful with some of the theory behind this. I think he talked about neoliberalism and what he called the political economy of speed. It's not his term, I guess, but what he described as the political economy of speed. The idea that capitalism necessarily degrades terms and conditions and health and safety prioritization and environmental compliance, and sort of naturally, and kind of the way he was describing it, naturally drew out this natural opposition between capital and labour, and capital and the environment, that labour and the environment have a sort of shared, a load of shared overlapping interests against those of capital. Is really useful theoretical framework, I think, for how we think about just transition and climate change in the labour movement. We then did a session on health and safety, health and safety hazards that arise from climate change and pursuit of net zero, but also how health and safety methodology and the specific powers of a health and safety rep can be an ally here, can help us, help green reps specifically, but also help workplaces adapt and change and be part of that worker-led transition piece. And we also looked at the role of climate change and sustainability education and the different roles that political education and class analysis can have in kind of galvanizing, I guess, members to take climate action and think about, impactful change in a workplace. I think that's all the kind of sessions we did, but they're the kind of things that we were thinking about. And I think, seeing that's maybe a lot of the areas that we need to cover as green reps or as climate activists in the labour movement. But I'm sure there are gaps, and I'm sure there are areas of that we haven't looked in enough detail. So in the last half hour or so, maybe slightly less, so we can do some roundup bits at the end, I thought it might be useful to open up a discussion centered around two questions. So firstly, what our priorities are now, what we should be doing, and the second one about how we can be more impactful. So I think if we do that first one first, what is, this is a genuine question to those in the room, what is the key priority for, or maybe the essential purpose of, green trade unionism now? So I'm thinking, when someone steps forward to say, I want to be a green rep, what do we tell them? But also I'm thinking the movement as a whole, what should we be focusing on? What's our primary goal? Is it decarbonizing? Well, I won't go through it, but what's the purpose now? What's the key priority for those in this room? And I'm thinking that this is a useful conversation both to shape what the TSE does next, but also maybe how the labour movement thinks about this going forward. So I wonder if we have any takers for that first thing, key priority for us going forward. Alan?
Well, I'd just like to make a very general sort of statement on that, which is that, to me, it's about the understanding that climate is a class issue, because I think that's increasingly understood by the wider climate justice movement, but it's still a long way to go in that. And obviously that movement only represents a tiny fraction of workers, and we're all workers, but it's not a widely understood framing, and therefore and there are many layers to that reason. I mean, it's class issue because of the capitalist dynamic that causes it, but also because of who's on the front line, who are the people who are going to be, first impacted and first, well, are going to be, I should be saying, are already, because it's very much also about building an understanding of the global solidarity that's needed, global class solidarity that's needed. And I think that's really, really hard, to achieve. But once you start framing it as a class issue and as a workers' issue, then it starts to become easier to think about it in a solidarity framing. And and I guess one of the reasons there why it's a working class issue is that ultimately it's only the working class that has the power collectively to do something. And I think that once you in a way that has to be the framework, because that's the only way that you get beyond kind of small fragmented kind of actions and onto something that looks more like a movement.
Thanks, Ellen. That's I mean the phrase that this is a class issue has come up a lot over the years, but I think maybe that internalization that is the case maybe isn't there. I think it's maybe not been mainstreamed with across the working class or across the trade union movement, that this is obviously a core thing. We'll go to Jenny.
Actually, Catherine had her hand up before me, a physical hand rather than
Oh yes,
digital
I
hand.
can see. Go on,
Okay,
Catherine.
Sorry, I'm working on a phone and I can't work out which bit of the screen to touch to try to make it do it. I think there's a key role that we have to maintain of that of education about the priorities. The top priority is to keep on telling people we have to do something about this, and it has in so many different fora and so many different places, and trying to find as many angles as possible to do it. So a key role has to be about education of our members and exploiting every opportunity we have to exploit to use those links that we have in the trade union movement. And I'll give you. I was sorry I was late this afternoon into the meeting trying to get things sorted, but Dave just was finishing off talking about the glass and plastics industry and mentioned Nottingley. And I was thinking I must make sure we make contact again, because we have I'm in Wakefield Trades Council and we have our Just Transition Wakefield project. But one of the key worries for Wakefield is that we've got the glassworks that aren't. There's 3 of them, aren't there? That are operating without electrical links into them, so they can't set up electrical arc furnaces. And so so we need to do whatever we possibly can, but we don't have members in those branches in there, so we can't speak for his purpose. So the GMB may not think, oh, we must go and tell Wakefield Trades Council about it, but we're trying to do whatever we can to make sure those jobs secure. So we also, what I'm doing this little instant as making sure we keep networks for links as well. So it's education and the links that we need to exploit.
Thanks. And I guess part of that is also just finding power, right? Work unions can be quite strong in workplaces that are unionized and that have a strong relationship with, but where we're not unionized, we're still relevant, because we're still representatives of the working class in a broader sense. And so asserting our power and finding campaigns that can make change, even where it's not, from the grassroots in a particular workplace. Yeah, I think definitely it's a good point. Jenny, we'll come to you then.
Yeah, I agree with the things that Ellen and Catherine have said, really, and I think sort of broadly education and organising are really important. I think like making more of climate in our organising, really. We need to do more organising anyway, don't we? I mean, that's something that in the world that we live in unions, it can be really, really hard. There's lots of work needed. There are so many unhelpful factors going on, so many precarious workplaces and so many issues on the table to deal with. but actually working with members in particular workplaces and helping them to look at, so how does the climate crisis, and it really is a crisis, how does that relate to our work and our issues and our company and our, you know, our scenarios? Because I think, you know, that rather than sort of imposing knowledge on people, it's like working from their knowledge of their own workplace and their own issues, and then making the links with that. I think, I mean, I think the international thing and the kind of sense of the scale of the climate crisis and the role of capitalism in that is really, really important. I went to an amazing talk in Sheffield the other month by Jason Hickel, who talks about how we could restructure the economy around human needs. And there's a lot of common ground there really with us as trade unions to say, you know, actually what's really important is our ability to have that voice at work, our, you know, our to meet the needs of our members. Who, it's not all about it. It's not about economic growth necessarily. It's more about, well, actually, have we got decent housing? Have we got decent food? Have we got decent transport? You know, and those things that people really need. So I want to kind of like, in the context of the climate crisis, make those links really, and try and draw out through organising the significance of that with our members on the ground in workplaces. That would be my kind of ideal, I suppose. Yeah, that makes some sense. I think the conference that you and I went to yesterday, Sam, has masses of stuff that is really, could be really helpful and really inspiring for this network as well, and for working in Yorkshire and Humber.
Yeah, yes, it was really interesting, wasn't it? I noted you. I was going through the participants to see who I knew. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. That's a really good point, and maybe part of that is building that. So it's about the mechanisms for change in many ways. So it's part of that is maybe also green reps, you know, like getting people to think about this in a broader sense, in that more decentralized way. Dave.
So you stole my thunder with those two words there, green reps. So that's what I'm finding. So if you think about what Jenny just said, it's there's so many things, there's so many factors in this. But what our biggest sort of boundary to get over, the biggest hurdle to get over, should I say, is that getting release for the reps to come to the panel, to actually have an input in this is what's causing the biggest headache, to be honest. We're sort of utilising lobbying because we've got, you know, I think we've got 69 affiliated MPs in the North East and Yorkshire to the GMB. So we can use a little bit of lobbying power. You know, it's good for you. It's as good for you as it is for us, for the company to release these reps. But without statutory rights like health and safety rights, you're never going to get the input that you need into these panels, into these forums. You're never going to tackle the issues because you literally haven't got the time to do it. And I don't think we can expect them to do it along with their own job. And I think one other thing that is really key is that the green reps, the environmental reps, the people who care about this, aren't the traditional trade union reps. From my perspective, you've got your health and safety reps, essentially sometimes aren't the traditional trade union reps again, because they have a slightly different take on the workplace, a slightly different motivation for what they do. We tend to leverage things into health and safety to make them an industrial matter, a legislation matter, so we can use the legislation to gain something. But we need to probably fully campaign for these green reps, especially whilst we've got a Labour government, to get statutory rights, because if we don't have them in the room, we're never going to get the issues sorted. And so without getting the foundations right, I mean, I'd like to be in a position where, we were going to the glass manufacturers and saying, we need your rep to be released to come to this panel because we need to, combat this massive energy problem you've got that's coming, but we actually have a statutory right to get those people into those rooms rather than just asking pretty please, and that's been I mean, we've got, from the background of the GMB, the energy workers, we've got the gas workers essentially. But it's a real battle to get people into that meeting, mainly due to release time. And as I say, unless we've got their input, we're not going to solve anything. We're just going to go down, we'll heavily go down the glass route because there's an interest, a financial interest for those companies. But that's potentially not the biggest thing we're trying to tackle here. But that's what the people on the panels are telling us. So that's a campaign we can start on. But without getting the other members from, like, say, the gas networks or from the electric networks, then we're not going to tackle the biggest issues.
Definitely, I think that's really well said. It's particularly interesting actually to hear. So various unions, I mean, we obviously don't have statutory rights. And partly as a result of that, different unions have gone different ways. And so we have a sort of similar category of green rep or something similar in a lot of unions, but also some don't have it at all. And others kind of define this different. GMB is one of these that doesn't have it as a kind of type of rep. I guess once, or if we get statutory rights, GMB would adopt that immediately. You're not going to not.
I'm sure what they try and do is they try and they're just going for the health and safety thing. So every industrial rep is a safety rep in the GMB. But yeah. I think it would be something similar to that they'd use the statutory right for the time and potentially keep the same reps. But what we're finding is we've take a work. Just take my workplace for example. We've got 18 reps in the region, but we've got 2 specific reps that aren't like senior reps or anything like that, but they are absolutely interested in this topic. So we have to get them in the room, but because they haven't got the release time, because they haven't have this seniority, it's a real battle to get those 2 reps released. But we don't want the equivalent of me in the Northeast in that meeting because he isn't bothered about that. He's not particularly interested in, this topic. He's just interested in grievances, disciplinaries, general industrial matters, pay negotiations, where we need the other guy, but we can't get him in there because they won't give him the release time because they already give enough release time to the other guy. So if we could, statutory committees, all the SREC regs manipulated into an environmental sort of setting, a climate setting, that would be absolutely superb, wouldn't it, to have some sort of legislation that gave us those rights.
Definitely, yeah, definitely, and I think that's a really clear example of the power that just having that set of rights would provide. The other sort of question, I'm aware your hands up, Ellen, but the other kind of side of this was priorities, and then how we can be more impactful. So how the labour movement, green labour activism, I guess, can be more effective. We're sort of already talking about that, so I think we can keep doing that. It's just to kind of flag that I know we're technically still on question 1, but it's the same question as question 2, so we don't need to pause and come back to this. Ellen, I'll come to you. Are you? Maybe she's frozen actually. Are you with us, Ellen? I saw someone say that doing Teams calls like this is sometimes it sounds like a seance. Can you hear us? Are you in the room? We'll go to Catherine, who has her hand
up. I'll just put another thing in that I probably, I could mention, because on the impactful question, trying to make that year of climate action as impactful as possible and to look for key allies wherever possible. The motion that we passed through region, that the Wytook brought through region about future-proofing workplaces and a year of climate action, which listed the unison action, call for a year of climate action. I've taken that, a very similar one, through the National Trades Council conference as well. So that is now National Trades Council policy to support the Year of Climate Action. And I've given them specifics, sort of suggestions to make sure that they linked with local union branches to organise a local regional conference, a conference in and activities in their areas, like Leeds did in 2019. And to try to bring together local green green reps in different branches. So that the trades councils, who may be some of the most key organisers of this, alongside some of the key branches, there should be allies in the trades councils that have also got the duty to try to create a year of action. So I'll just tell you this so that you know that. And I've said in that motion that it should start because the NEU motion to that effect said to start in the autumn term. So it was ready for COP. So the Trades Council motion's suggesting that it starts, with the act in the run up to COP.
Right. Yeah. Okay. That's fantastic. That's good. That's good to know. Actually, it's good to have this in multiple different fora. I guess just being overlapping approaches to this. I think wherever the start date is, the bulk of it is going to overlap anyway, so it doesn't really matter, I think. But I think that's a really good point about this decentralized thing. It is interesting that the Year of Trade Union Climate Action, as we're hearing about it so far, is mostly a grassroots movement. The officers in the national unions are increasingly keen to do something. So I think it might be that grassroots can start making more concrete asks of officers, and it can kind of run parallelly. There's a lot of benefit from it being grassroots and being, responding to individual local, interests. But there's also a lot of benefit with it coming top down as well, and it might be quite nice if it meets in the middle. So if it's a useful thing to do, that's definitely something I'm trying to do to try and bridge that gap with folks. Ellen, we came to you, but then we lost you. Should we come to you now? Should we try it?
Yeah, sorry, my cable fell out and the battery doesn't work. It takes forever to get back on. I think what I was, just on what I just caught tail end of what Catherine was saying though, and I think it is important that, like, the NEU was one of the first unions to pass this second motion about Year of Climate Action, and it was to start really with the start of the new academic year, wasn't it? But I think it's actually quite, in a way, it starts now, because the motions that we've been circulating emphasise that the COP as a key mobilising moment. You've probably said all this while I was off, but so the global day of workplace action on the 14th of November, and then a global day of mass mobilisations on the 15th of November in the middle of COP. That's not going to happen unless we start building for it now and organising for it now, is it? That it's really, I think it comes into the whole discussion about what priorities for the trade union Year of Climate Action, that having really, really prominent trade union visibility on these mass mobilisations, because that's where we've really been failing over the past few years, that people have come, individually with, and some people have come with trade union banners, but very, very little. And we need, that we need a mass presence on those things, even if they've been organised by other organisations. And there is a big mobilisation happening in September as well, prior to that. So, I think it's encouraging people to get on those, as well as doing the more directly workplace related stuff. But what I was going to say is actually that, as somebody with a kind of, if you like, a foot in the wider climate justice movement, as much as in the trade union side, people, I think I've said it before, that I think that my observation is that climate activists, in the wider sense, are becoming more and more conscious of the fact that it's about it's about the work we do. It's about a just transition for workers, and also that the importance of workers organising around this, but it leaves them not knowing what to do. They want to be in solidarity with workers doing that, but they're not. If they're not active in a union themselves, and let's face it, a lot of climate activists are retired, and you can tell them to join Unite Community, as I am, but we have rather more limited scope as a branch. But I think that identifying demands that the wider movement can really throw its weight behind is really important. And just from this conversation, I'm thinking that those demands can be around things like public ownership and around things like statutory time for green reps to go to meetings and be on forums and that sort of thing, that they're concrete things, because it's a bit hard for wider movement activists to know what they can do about specific industrial struggles. I mean, it's happening. You've got organisations, obviously Friends of the Earth and Platform and organisations like that are doing a lot on just transition issues. But more, we can have demands that everybody can get behind, whether they're a trade union activist or not, but which are focused on making the trade union activity more powerful.
Definitely, I think that's, yeah, thank you. That's well said. And I think you're right, squaring this trade union specific action and wider movement action and bringing those together is really helpful, including things like having trade union banners at non-trade union specific events and vice versa, kind of closes that blue-green lines kind of style, circle there. We're coming towards the end, so I'll close that discussion. I think it's really, personally, I found that quite helpful to see a bit of your feeling about the direction that the year of trade union climate action, but also green organising generally, to see the direction that might benefit from taking. I hope that's useful for others as well. Just in the last few minutes, last 10 minutes or so, what we tend to do is announcements, anything that's coming up. I've started now circulating these in a slightly more organised way, and so hopefully that's actually a better way of communicating this than just saying it in these meetings. But I just want to remind people particularly of a couple of bits. There's this University of Leeds, just because we are in North East Yorkshire and Humber, there's this University of Leeds climate action course that they're making freely available, and they're very keen to for others to push. It's actually been developed by activists who are in trade unions and are active green reps in their trade unions. It's a really good course. It is free. It's online. It's the kind of thing that people here or watching back may want to do themselves, but it's because it's sort of about climate action, effective climate action in a workplace, but also in your wider community and going beyond the do your little bit narrative. But it's also the kind of thing that members may want to push to their membership in their branches or to colleagues in their workplaces. It's the kind of thing that might be kind of, because it's not trade union specific, kind of helpful, but it's got our messages in it, helpful at a wide level. So I'll recirculate the link to that. But those who have taken it so far or have started it so far are saying it's very good and it does look really good. So just push that. We've also got a few bits coming up. The Trade Union Clean Air Network and UCU are holding this webinar and in-person seminar in London on the 18th of June, which looks really well worth looking at. That looks like it's going to be an important thing. Green Jobs Alliance in a wider way are doing some interesting stuff at the moment. They've got a new newsletter out, be worth looking at. And just to say, because it relates to some of this stuff, I was going to say earlier that the Humber Industrial Cluster Plan, there's a kind of particular immediacy there because we now have mayors in that area, one of whom at least is overtly hostile to people having jobs in net zero, and so the far right and climate justice is a kind of very related issue relationship now. the TUC for North East Yorkshire and Humber are holding these anti-far right briefings. We've done a couple of them in Yorkshire already. We're doing another one in Middlesbrough, 24th of June, and another one in Sunderland on the 27th of June, I think. So I'll circulate these, but that linkage is just really key and becoming even more key with Reform's particular nonsense. And so I thought I'd flag that here. Are there any other announcements of events or anything that people would want to flag at this point, or for me to advertise? Ellen?
I've just put it in the chat, but the heat strike campaign, they're promoting a heat strike week, 14th to the 20th of July, which is really, I mean, hopefully heat strike stuff will run and run throughout the year of action and things, but it's about demands for maximum workplace temperatures and for, you know, people to get furlough when it's too hot to work, and on proper heat resilience of buildings and all of those things. But in that, I mean, it might be it might be a freezing cold week for all we know that week, but it just for people to start doing, you know, it could be small actions like going out on a lunchtime with a rally with a banner and doing some photos for social media, or holding a meeting, you know, getting a speaker in for your branch meeting or whatever. But just you know, to get warmed up on that. And I just want to say, yes, and we have also got this this West Yorkshire meeting for a fare free buses campaign to look at. That's going to be on the 3rd of July, and I haven't got any publicity material to share for that yet, but I will share it as soon as possible. But yeah, it's already been mentioned that as a key workplace issue. And the other one obviously being the retrofit campaign that's been launched by the Peace and Justice Campaign and ACORN and the Fuel Poverty Action Group. So I'm not sure when the next kind of all member or all public meeting is going to be, but there is a call out for people to get involved who've got anything to do with whether it's campaigning or whether they're actually doing practical projects or retrofit education. I'm particularly keen with my campaign against climate change trade union hat on. I'm particularly keen to hear from people who are interested in campaigning on the training side. So basically, you know, people in UCU who work in the FE sector, or people who want to push for it within the local authorities, that sort of thing.
Excellent, thanks. They're all very worth flagging up. Yeah, heat strike. Yeah, it has that week, and then hopefully when temperatures reach, I forget the actual threshold, but a very high temperature, then they will call a heat strike. So we should all be prepared for that as well. It's one of those things where unions think, oh, should have been prepared for that. We'll be better prepared next year, and then never quite get around to it. So yeah, definitely happy to share that, and we should be aware of that. I'll share the Free Fair Buses thing in West Yorkshire as well. And yes, Retrofit for the Future is an important campaign. We should try and highlight that as much as possible, so I can send those details around to the wider group as well. Okay, well, we're towards the end of time. Oh, Catherine, do you have your hand is not big yellow hand, so it's more difficult to see.
Yeah, sorry. So I'm sitting in contrast, so you get a bit of the light. Yeah. It is Big Green Week next week, so that people can use that as an angle, which is the sort of thing that appeals in schools. But it might go on the top of it's one of those things that sounds neutral. It's more neutral than others. It's the Climate Coalition. They're calling for swaps. It might be swap the system, but you can start it off with a book swap or a clothes swap or whatever else. But it's a vehicle for conversations that can go on the bottom of newsletters as well, isn't it, for people? So, or on the top of a newsletter, because it's great. I believe the churches are also doing things next week called Count on Nature. So they're also got a thing we told at our meeting thing. And whenever you talk about the heat strike, I will keep mentioning the Joint Union Heatwave Protocol that GMB and whatever else keep on, because there is guidance there. I know it's about schools, but to be able to refer to that in discussions for other workplaces, because offices are similar to schools, aren't they? Then they can. It's a useful thing.
That's right. Yeah, that thanks. They're good campaigns as well. And you're right, that heatwave protocol was really useful. It is technically for educational institutions, isn't it? But yeah, you're right. It applies to everywhere. So, and almost all the key unions sign up to it anyway, so it can sort of be used for everyone. I will draw it to a close there because we're at time. But thank you very much for everyone who's attended, and hopefully, and hi to all those who will watch this back. We do get those who do that, and so thank you for joining us, even if you were here right now, or if you're here later on in that confusing way. Great, thanks a lot, everyone.